Namaskar and Jai Hind. Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a video and a podcast show that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. We're now in season 5 of our show and have over 2,000 recordings for you, which you can see at www.tbcy.in. Today, it's my privilege to welcome Mr. Apparao Mallavarapu, Chairman and Managing Director of Centum Electronics Ltd, Bangalore, a publicly listed company on the National and the Mumbai Stock Exchange. Welcome to TBCY, Apparao.
Thank you, Sesh. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
Pleasure is all ours, Appa. Rao graduated with a master's degree from Deltec University in Canada and received his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Bangalore University. He is a Ford Foundation Scholar. Under his leadership, Centum has grown to be a global electronics design and manufacturing company with operations in India, France, Belgium, and Canada. 80% of Centum's revenue comes from Europe, USA, and Canada, and Israel. Centum's customers are Fortune 500 companies such as Thales, GE, Airbus, Safran, and Rafael. In India, they work closely with BDL, BEL, ISRO, and many other leading companies of the country. The Embassy of Federated Republic of Brazil has appointed Apparao as Honorary Consul of Brazil in Bangalore. He has been conferred with the prestigious Order of the Rio Branco by the Brazilian government. Apparao has also been conferred the Officer in the National Order of Merit by the French government. ELSINA, the largest electronic industry body in India, has awarded Rao with Electronics Man of the Year award. Champion of Innovation Award was given to Apparao by the Prime Minister of New Zealand at the New Zealand Innovation Showcase event. Apparao is on the board of several companies, both public and private, and on the board of advisors of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Due to his deep sense of responsibility towards children who are not so fortunate, he has committed philanthropic activities largely focused on children. Apparao's list of accomplishments are real long. I can just go on and on, but I'm going to pause here and open up the dialogue with him. Welcome to the TBCY once again. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And I must tell you, I've been looking forward for this for some time. And it's a pleasure I'm so excited that, at last we could get our calendars to meet and then, we could slot the time up. Thank you for taking time out.
Thank you, Shesh. It's really my pleasure to be here this afternoon. And I've heard about your podcast. I've listened to them. I've seen them. It's been a great show. I feel very privileged and honored that you actually invited me to be on this show. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. So thank you for those kind words. They mean a lot to us. So, Appa, for many people, I'm going to take the liberty of calling you Appa because I think that's how I've always called you. Though I know many other people call you Rao, and so I think I'm going to stay with the comfort of the word Appa. So I think I'm going to call you Appa. So I hope that's okay with you. So Appa, I have to ask you, can you just quickly walk us through your journey from the early days? How did you conceive Centum? How did that happen? And how did Centum come to life? And, of course, and quickly also tell us as to what Centum does.
Okay. Again, in terms of, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Not knowing what it really means. I come from a family of academicians. My father was a professor, my uncles are professors. They're all from Indian Institute of Science. My wife is a scientist herself. And but I never could get into ISC. So I guess I figured I'm going to do business. But no, seriously, I think I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Quite honestly, didn't know what it meant. But I liked the idea. And it stayed with me for very, very long. And like you mentioned, I was out of the country for a few years, came back and actually worked for an uncle of mine for 10 years. And then I went up to him and I said, look, I really want to be an entrepreneur. And so I want to move on. And he was very kind. And he said, sure, I'll support you, and which he did. And that's how Centum came about. What I did at that time, obviously, is you go to your existing customers. And I used to work for my uncle, as I mentioned. I went to the same customers and said, hey, can we do something else for you? And then, of course, they said, yeah, well, you can make what is called a hybrid microcircuit, which was the pain for them at that point in time, right?
Right.
So when you ask a customer, he's going to tell you what is his pain point at that moment. Then we said, okay, sounds good. So we went out, did some research. The numbers look good looking forward. And the Indian government had come up with a telecom policy at that time. And all these huge numbers were being projected. So we said, oh, this is a good place to be, because this is my existing customers, they know us, and they are recommending we make this product. So I went out to North America, got some technology at that point, and started this company. And I'm a first generation entrepreneur. I'm an engineer, maybe was an engineer. But business and engineering are quite different. You don't understand cash flow. You don't understand, maybe you understand a little bit of P&L, but anyways, very quickly we got into serious trouble, because as always, mostly I should say, government policies and implementation, there's a time lag. And we didn't figure that out till we actually got into the business. So the time lag was quite difficult for us. And so one thing led to another, and that's when we said, hey, you can't depend on the Indian market. So you have to be global. And since I studied in North America, I said, okay, maybe we should go out and see if I can sell this product elsewhere in the world, because there was no market in India. So that's how the first step of becoming global. And then, of course, we were making only one product and for Indian market, and that's it. And then, of course, one thing led to another. We had a strategic tie-up with the Canadian company. And in 1998, there was this Asian currency crisis. And this Canadian company had all their facilities in the UK for a particular product called frequency control product. And because of the currency crisis, the won was depreciated big time, and they were becoming very competitive in the Western world. And so CMAC came to me and said, hey, will you set up a factory for us to make frequency control products? It's an electronic component again, for export. I said, sure. And so that's how we set up the second product line, which was a great hit. We actually moved a complete facility, actually two facilities, from UK, one from UK and one from France. And so that's how the second product line at Centum started, again, for the global market. Then, of course, .com bust happened and everything.
I'm going to pause you, because I think I want you to little dwell on one other aspect of it, because I remember the times when you got into manufacturing. This country was doing manufacturing, but at a different kind altogether. They were all old economy businesses who were doing manufacturing. And you very correctly pointed out, between what government says and by the time the policies get implemented and it sees the light of the day, the whole thing starts rolling, there is a huge time lag. You not only went into manufacturing at that time, but you went into electronics. Technology itself was very, very new word in this country. A lot of people were trying to put their head around technology. Even IT had kind of not taken its foot around the whole thing. And you get onto it, and then you do one more thing, is to go into something very niche space. Now, obviously, what you are telling, and you're making it sound very easy and simple, that how it happened. But I want you to really dwell on this and tell us that how some of these transitions happened. What went through? How did you think of going into that space? Because obviously, the background you come from, you had exposure to many other things you could do.
Right. No, I think quite clearly in terms of, I always believed in the Indian talent. I think
Mhm.
talent in India has never been an issue. I think there's it's great people, great capabilities. It's just that opportunities didn't exist, right? So what I did, maybe because I think most of my friends who went to the US or to Canada at that time never came back, which I did. And so I said, maybe we should start looking at leveraging India's capability. And everything that I did was for the global markets. And everything I did, I got the technology either from US or Canada or UK or wherever, and made product for the Western world. So one, in terms of technology, I was able to get the know-how from the Western world. Number two, the markets were there. Markets were always there. And we were very competitive. The challenge, of course, was the mindset in the Western world about Indian quality, and that was always a challenge. And I must tell you, in the initial days when I used to sell the product myself, right? So I'd go to someone and show the product, and most of these guys would look at the product under a microscope. And the very polite guys would look up and say, "You made this in India?" And not so very polite guys would say, "You want me to believe this was made in India?" Which means that I bought it from somewhere else and I'm claiming it's my product. So that was the perception, and that was the challenge, I would say, which was very difficult to break. But then I think I run very good relationships, and I always work with large companies, and we always branded for them. It was never our product, right? So it was a lot easier to get into the market because you brand it for someone else and they're selling it, so people don't. But a time came that I started insisting to my customers, saying, you can brand your name, but on the box or on the product, it has to say made in India. Because for me, it was very important that people, okay, it may be the name of the brand which people are comfortable with or they feel secure, but at the same time, they should also know it's made in India. So I started insisting, and some of them actually gave in. And they said, Rao, we appreciate what you're saying. And there was also, in certain cases, there was a rule that you had to mention where it was manufactured. So that's how, in terms of, to answer your question, how did I get into manufacturing? How did I get into niche manufacturing? It was purely, I was catering to markets outside of India. It was not India. India was not my market. So I hope I've sort of answered your question.
No, you have. From the time you started, Centum has seen a wonderful journey. But what we see of Centum today, you are a very huge organization today, working with all the top companies around the world. Now, obviously, in this whole journey of building, what were some of the big frustrations which you're building? Because you're catering, one of them, what you said, people were questioning the quality that you're an Indian company, you're manufacturing in India. Will India be able to deliver that? But what were the other frustrations? Because that's a big frustration in itself. But what are the other ones?
I could keep you here the whole day. But no, I think, to me, I think the interest rates, when I started the business, right? Can you believe the interest rate I was paying was 21%? 21. So, I mean, how can you do business with 21%, even within India, right? Forget about.
You're working for the bank.
I think absolutely, it was so difficult, right? So that to me was something that, again, these are the things that you don't understand as a first generation entrepreneur. You say, hey, this is a nice idea, let me go do it. And then you start getting into trouble. Again, some of the, I think frustrations can be both from the customer side and from the domestic within the country. this is in the past. I think things are a lot more different today. I think customs was a big issue because we were in exports, right? You want to bring in and take out material very quickly. Speed is of the essence. And, that was not the case. But now I must tell you, I think things have changed significantly. Right? So quite honestly, if you ask me, what are the challenges? It's like when you have a headache, at that moment, it's terrible. And when it's gone, 2 days later, if somebody turns around and says, how bad was the headache? You don't even remember. It's gone. It's behind. Right? So there were enough and more of these kind of frustrations. The other thing that big issue that we've had was whenever we transferred, we excelled, and we still do excel in lift and shift. We would just lift the whole facility, 300 people, 500 people, and we would move it into India. So there's always the naysayers on the other side, right? Because they don't want you to succeed. And then there are the people who support you. And then there's a bunch of people who are sitting on the wall and watching which way this is going to go, right? Should they jump on the success side or, the failure side? So that always was a big issue because if the naysayers, if we do something wrong, our quality is not as good, or we don't deliver when we said we will deliver, the naysayers become very, very powerful. And then the whole thing scuttles. So that's another big issue. It's, like I said, I probably have to spend some time thinking, but it's in the past. Like I said, I think the government's attitude was very different in the past. If you went to the government and said, I think this is what we should do, they would tell you, no, this is what you should do. I will tell you what you need to do. And that was very frustrating. But the reality is today, the government solicits opinion, and, they come and say, hey, what can we do different? What is happening in the world outside? Because in the past, I remember I'd go up and say, Chinese are doing this, or the Koreans are doing this. And I think we should do that because we always competed with the Chinese or the Koreans. And later, of course, now we compete with the Western world also, right? Because at that time, we were purely working on cost arbitrage. Whereas today, it's not just cost, it's just capability, it's the competencies, it's the technology that we have. So we compete with the Americans, with the Germans, with the French, with everyone else. But at that time, it was mostly the Eastern Asian countries. And people in the Indian government would never listen. But today it's very, so I can go on and on. Yeah, things have changed for the better.
Thank you, Apparao. I think that's very insightful. But I have something to ask you here. Is India today is very aggressively promoting itself as the next manufacturing hub outside of China. India is really saying make in India, made in India is becoming very, very popular. And I want to ask you, you touched upon 2-3 very interesting points. And in context to that, I want to ask you, how has this country changed, between then and now? Of course, there are a lot of things which have opened up, but purely from the point of view, from the quality, do people still around the world, is India ready from the quality and the cost point of view? Is India ready as a manufacturing hub to take on this? Because obviously China is still very dominant, Taiwan is very dominative, Korea is very dominative, and in some other industries, countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, they are very active. So how do you see this? How do you, one, what is the change? And how do you think how ready is India from your point of view?
Obviously, the Chinese and the Koreans and the Taiwanese, they have a head start on us. So they clearly have a head start. But in terms of perception, Sage, in the Western world about the Indian quality and so on, I think thanks to the IT industry, I think they have done a superb job. They have sort of laid the road for the manufacturing guys to actually walk a lot more easier, because India is known as technical guys, very strong technical people. That's the image that the IT industry has created for India. And so now when we go and say, hey, we manufacture this really complex space system or a defense product or whatever, they're more than willing to talk to you and so on. So I think that's really helped. Is it completely gone? Clearly, no. The answer is, one of the things I keep talking in the company all the time is make sure whatever we make from a quality perspective is absolutely first class. Because what normally happens is, and this is actually, I hope other companies are doing this. I'm sure they are, the leadership at least. I say, if we do something, if we send a product that gets rejected outside in the world, people will forget the name of Centum. They don't remember Centum in some years. All that they will remember is that an Indian company quality was not good. And so Indian quality is not good. And that's a shame that we shouldn't be doing, because it's branding the whole country, right? So I think people should be very, very cautious and very, very, careful when they engage with outside world, because I think they represent the country. It's not just about your own company. And so to me, that's very, very important. But clearly, coming back to your point, it's a lot more easier today. And many of these large corporations, whether it's companies like GE or Hitachi or ABB, they have this concept of best cost country, not low cost country, wherever it's best to manufacture the product. And I think clearly India is right up there in those lists, and we are seeing the benefits of that. Now, coming back to your question on the policy and so on, how the policy is helping manufacturing, I think it's helping significantly. The way I see it is two or three things. One is the trade war between US and China, which started some years ago. It actually started even before COVID, right? There were all kinds of barriers and so on. So the American companies started looking for another country. It was China plus one strategy. It's very difficult to exit China. I think it's going to take a long, long, long time. And I don't think anybody will want to exit. I think what they would want is to mitigate the risk by having another geographical area. It could be Mexico, close to the US. It could be India. It could be Philippines. It could be Vietnam. It doesn't matter. But I think they're all looking for a China plus one strategy. While they do that, I think the Make in India policy of the government is really helping, because what they look, the large corporations, is there also an Indian market or a domestic market? If I move my facility, or if I start sourcing from a country, for obviously its costs and quality and whatever else, but is there also a domestic market? Now you have a Vietnam and you have a Malaysia and you have all of these countries. They're good, they're great in manufacturing too, but the local market is not as big, right? And now the Indian government is saying, if you want to access a local market, you have to manufacture here. So it's two birds with one stone kind of thing, where they mitigate the risk. It's a China plus one strategy. And not only that, if I want to be in the Indian market, I better be in India and manufacture in India. So what they used to import in the past into India, they're saying, well, let's make it in India, not only for the Indian market, let's also take it out to wherever. And we've actually seen this, and we've been beneficiaries of this particular strategy that most of these large corporations are following. So I think then, of course, there's the Make in India for defense, and and space is opening up. And so we are seeing the tailwinds are on our side, and I think it's good times.
Fantastic. It's great to hear that. Obviously you have traveled this big journey, and reached a certain place where you look back and sit. And obviously, there's a lovely, great success story behind. What does success mean to you? How do you interpret that? How do you experience that? How do you live that?
I'm still looking for it.
More of it, you mean? More of it.
No, I think success is quite honestly, there's no goalpost. Goalpost keeps shifting. I must tell you, when I started the business, I thought if I did 25 crores revenue, I'm a happy man. And of course, you move on and then you get there and then you so I think for me, success is, are you making a difference? And that to me is very important. To me, money is a byproduct. Money is not the goal. Because if you make money the goal, many times you could make errors that you don't want to, and it's probably not a very sustainable model. What you need as a company is it sustainable? Whatever you're doing, is it sustainable? We are 30 years old and we hope we'll be here another 30 or more. So to me, I think success is to continue to change, improve your goalpost, keep doing something better, be different, and learning, continuous learning, I think is very, very important. I'm a forever learning person because I don't think we have all the answers to everything. So, I quite honestly, the way I see it is, this is a poster that I saw many, many years ago when I was a kid in ECIL. Actually, it said, what it said? Yeah, it says, I complained that I didn't have shoes until I met a man who didn't have feet.
Without the feet. Yeah.
So you should always be happy where you are, but
Right.
that doesn't stop you from having an ambition.
Right.
You must have an ambition. If you have no ambition, there's no life. So you need to have an ambition, and ambition needs to, once you get to where you want to, then you have another one, right?
Right.
So to me, success is something that will come in the future. So you always have a goal. So.
Very well said. Very well said. Appa, behind every successful man, there is a, which nobody gets to see it, nobody talks about it. There are plethoras of failures which will go. Some have it, some don't have anything at all, and they just are lucky enough to hit, move from one peak to other peak, and they move on. But many people have a lot of, they experience failures. Now, I want to ask you, have you experienced failures? And if you have, which has been the most profound one, and is there a learning from it? And it could be professional or a personal, whatever you think, something which has touched you and had an impact on you and made you something, and you went through a change because of
that. It's a tough question. I mean, failure is something that we all come across. I honestly, I'm not trying to be. You should have warned me about this question. I can tell you, one of the things I tell my guys in the office is, if there's one guy who's made the maximum number of mistakes, it's me. But it's a part of you try many things and then you fail, and then you say you get up and you say, no, this is, if you ask me, I would say right off the bat, when I started the business, I was a failure. And that was terrible times, honestly. I mean, they were really bad times. And then you hang in there, you persevere, you have to work very hard. And quite honestly, I also believe in luck. And I must tell you a very funny story. And this is when things were really horribly bad. And I was going to the US to sell. And I sat in the flight from Singapore to Tokyo. And this is after an overnight flight from Chennai to Singapore. Had no sleep. And I had these 3 seats. And I thought, oh, I can sleep now. Just before the flight took off, one gentleman comes and sits there, an American guy, and he looks at me and he says, "Hi, my name is David. What's yours?" And then the conversation starts, and I was like, "Oh, I wanted to sleep. Why are you sitting here?" Right? And then the guy starts talking, and he happens to be the senior vice president of one of the largest corporations. And this is, I was flying economy till very recently, actually. And the guy was sitting in economy, and later he told me that was the policy of his company, right? But he's a guy I would never have been able to get an appointment for forever if I tried to. And he came and sat beside me, and that was my first export order.
Wow.
So failure, when we talk about failures, there's always the other side, which is, how lucky can I be? So I genuinely, honestly believe I'm one of the luckiest guys that I know. So, I don't know if I've answered your question, but
I think somebody once told me, in fact, it was my first job as a management trainee, and my boss told me that I'm okay, Shesh, if you do 100 mistakes in a day. I'm okay with that, as far as you learn from each one of them. And you're not repeating those mistakes.
Yeah.
If you repeat it, I'll be upset. But if you learned it, I'm okay. And I'm still in touch with this gentleman, and we are good friends today. But I'm telling you, it stayed with me and stuck with me that it's okay to do a mistake, because that's, if you don't try, you will not get it. And there's no guarantees for anything. So you have to give yourself a chance to try it. So I think I can relate to what you just said, yes, there is some stroke of luck, which we all need it.
I also think, it's the team that we work with, right? And I think it's, I've been again, I said I'm a very lucky guy, and I think I'm very fortunate to have a fantastic team that works for me. And or I should say, I work with them. I would have probably made a lot more mistakes if they weren't around. It's how the team works together, and I completely believe in teamwork. Actually in Centum we have 3 words. It says trust, technology, and teamwork. You need to trust your people, and people should be able to trust you. And of course, we are a tech company. And then, of course, without teamwork, there's nothing. So I probably would have made a lot more mistakes if I didn't have the team that I work with. So,
right. That brings me, you said teamwork, and you say you're a tech company. I want you to talk to us a little about what is the future of electronics industry in this country. That's number one, because we are right now, everybody is talking about electronics, and there are many JVs for and against which are going on, and we are the big manufacturing companies are coming to India. I want to talk to you to tell us about what do you think is the future of electronics. And second, I want you to also dwell on what is the future of your business, because you are in the center of the mega thing which is happening in this country. India space program is just, we are just growing and growing, and there are very dynamic and aggressive plans India has. And I know of it that your products are integral part, and you work closely with ISRO and many other space companies, and your products are integral part to it. So what do you see as the future of for Centum? What do you see the future of this industry? And how do you see all this growing up and panning off?
Okay, I think 2 points. Basically, you're asking two. What is the future of electronics in India? And
yes.
Then about the company. I have to be a little careful about the company we are listed. So
okay.
I'm trying to go.
Whatever you're allowed to speak.
So, but as far as the country is concerned, I think it's a very, very good time to be here, Sesh. I think multiple things. Like I said, it's the Make in India policy is really working. And like we started off by saying, there is always a time lag between policy announcements and actually things happening on the ground, because this policy announcement is not new. It's been there for probably 4 or 5 years. but we are seeing the benefits right now, and we've been beneficiaries of that. So, and as you know, electronics is probably after oil today. Electronics is the biggest import bill that India has, and we can't live with that. It has to change. So I think the policy is very conducive, number one, and it's also making almost, I know companies which were importing product from their existing locations wherever in the world and selling it in India, right? Mm-hmm. Now the government has said, if you don't make it in India, you can't even bid, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you don't add at least 50% value in India, you can't bid. And public utilities, for example, is a very good example. So companies that were importing the product from wherever and selling in India, they can't even bid. So they have moved on. They have said, okay, we'll start manufacturing. And the concept was, let's manufacture for India, because if we don't, we'll be out of the market. They started to manufacture in India. And the best part is the quality is as good. Deliveries are as good. The price is much lower. And then the same companies are saying, hey, wait a minute, why wouldn't we export this? Why are we making where we are making, right? And so we are seeing that happening. And so that's clearly, and there's a lot more examples like this. That's number one. Number two, electric vehicles, clean tech. This is something the PLI scheme, what the government has introduced. It's a fabulous way. And today, cell phones, if you go back a few years, it was nothing. And today, I don't have the exact numbers because I'm not in that market, but it's huge, right? And now the question is, the next phase is, how do you increase the value add of the cell phones that are made in India? Still, a lot of components are imported into the country. But I'll tell you what, you go back and look at how China grew in their own growth phase. They always start with the finished product. Right? You start assembling the finished product, and then you import whatever you have to import. And then a time comes that you're making so much, it makes sense to start creating a better supply chain within your own country. So the supply chain always follows the product. You can't be making the semiconductor, but there is no market in India, right? Because you have to export. That's not going to work. So as the manufacturing increases, even for the finished product, the supply chain is going to happen. And that's really clearly, then coming to defense, for example. Indian government has published the positive list, which will be made in India. And there used to be a time that we would approach foreign OEMs saying, hey, India is a good market. Would you give us the know-how? Let's work together, do something in India for the Indian market. And pretty much everybody would say, there's no need to, because the government, there'll be a global tender and we'll respond to the global tender. Guess what now the government has done? They said, no, you can't import. If you want to sell in India, you have to make in India. So now the very same OEMs would turn around and say, okay, guys, let's work with you and let's see how we can address the Indian market by manufacturing in India or designing in India, whatever that may be, as long as we add value in India. So to that extent, I think the policies are in the right place, because if the policy is not there, you can do what you want. It's not going to happen. So I think I see a fabulous future, and I think the numbers are, and you can see even in the last few years, the numbers are increasing. And normally some of these things, the uptake will be slow, and then the graph goes up much faster. So, it's always it's so, I wouldn't call it a hockey stick. Let's not exaggerate, but quite, it's
growth is there.
Growth will be quite fast as the time goes by. The rate of growth, at least.
Interesting.
So,
about 30 years, sorry.
And the second question about Centum Electronics, we are a part of this whole thing. One of the things that we did, Sej, in 2016, we went out and acquired a French company. It was a stressed asset. People thought we were mad. quite honestly, and it was a stressed asset. And we were able to turn it around. Things are looking good now. But the important thing is, this was a very a niche design company. It had 500, it has 500 engineers. And they're all, these are the guys who are actually designing the landing gear for Airbus or autopilot for Airbus, things like that. So we went and acquired that company. And one of the things that we're doing is what the products that they've designed, which they used to get it outsourced in France or some other country. Now we are saying, wait a minute, we can do that in India. So we've actually moved all that production into India, into our own facility. So we've sort of insourced it. So these are the kind of things that we're doing, and we'll clearly see more of that happening. And so that's one part. And coming to defense and space, which is the only business that we do in India, the only business that we currently do in India in a significant manner is defense, aerospace, and space. Of course, now thanks to the clean tech, which is electric vehicles and hydrogen and so on, we are also working with the Indian customers for those technologies and those product lines. But again, we see all of this for us. The tailwinds are on our side. I think all the ducks are aligned. We feel pretty good. And I see a very, very bright future for Centum.
30 years growing, and you say all the ducks are lined up, and you see a great future. All that said, how do you manage to stay relevant? Because the most important thing is to stay contextual, stay relevant, stay aligned, and stay in the present. How do you do that?
It's actually quite simple. Honestly, listen to your customer.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell the customer what he needs. You listen to the customer, right? So and that's very important, because many a times, I can tell you this, the technologies that we've developed is not because we cooked it up in our heads and we said, hey, I think the market needs this. And we develop that technology and go to the market. Once or twice we did it, it was a disaster. Well, talking about failures, I can talk about that, right? But quite honestly, many a times when although I'm saying I truly believe we do something very, very high tech in the country. But I can also tell you the reason we do that is because the customers push us to do it. And by and large, when we start, we probably know how to do 70% of it or 80% of it. There's a gap, and we need to learn how to do it. And of course, customers always work hand in hand with us. And it's always the customer. So going back to your question, how do you stay relevant? Continue talking to your customer, continue to listen to your customer. We are a B2B, by the way. We are not a B2C. So B2C, maybe I think it's a different kind of business, whereas B2B is a completely different ballgame. So I think that is very important. Then you also look at the mega trends. If you really look, clean tech is something that's going to be there. Now, if you don't get into clean tech, then you're going to be left behind. So you also look at medical devices. For India, for example, 70 to 80% of medical devices are imported into the country. 70 to 80%. So that's clearly an opportunity, right? So there are two things. One is you listen to the customer. Second, you look at the mega trends. Third is the policy. Policy makes a huge difference. So you need to stitch all these and connect these dots to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, right? Sometimes also you have to be careful. Like I said, many a times the customer tells us, go and do this. And we've done it. And it's been a disaster. Not that we didn't make the product. We made the product, but the customer doesn't now, he changes his mind. So you also have to be careful. While I say what I say, I think it's this. The second thing is, I think your workforce, the young people make a huge difference. Quite honestly, I think while we are a 30-year-old company, our average age is still very low, right? So both in mind and in reality. I am the oldest guy in the company. So I think there's tremendous energy, young people, trust them, give them the opportunity to fail. Okay, don't tell them it's okay to fail, because then they won't take it seriously, right? But I think it's give them a job and say, I expect you to do it. I know you can do it. And 70 to 80% of the time, I'm actually surprised that these guys have been able to do what I thought they would fail, right? That's number one. The other thing, our own experiences, Shesh. We worked very long and we have a lot of experience. Many a times, what we tried to do 20 years ago and we failed, right? When somebody comes and says, I want to do that, you're going to say, no, don't do it. I've done it. I failed. But I think, times are different, environment is different, energy is different, talent is different, knowledge is different. Let them try. And believe me, many a times, they're able to do things that I couldn't do in the past. So talking about being relevant, I think you need to allow people to come out and do stuff. And training. Training is, we spend a huge amount of training. I'm not trying to say that I'm in anything very special, but I still, me at my age, I go to Harvard every year for a week. And I've been doing it for 12 years, and I hope to continue, right? Because there's always something you will learn. And it's for a whole week. You meet people from across the world. It's a great learning experience. And then, of course, you're all charged up. You come back and you push your guys to do what you have to. Industry 4.0, for example, is something that, we push really hard in the company. Automation, digitalization. These are not buzzwords, by the way. They're actually being implemented. It starts off as a buzzword, right? And then then you say, oh, whoa. And so that's, I think, to stay relevant, you just need to stay young in your mind and hang out with friends like you who are 10, 15 years younger to me, and I can stay relevant.
It's a good thought, which we'll not discuss age here, but it's a good thought. I'll not dispute you on my age. So I'll let you grow with that belief that I'm 15 years younger to you. So it's okay. Appa, you made a very interesting reference. We're running out of time, so this would be my last question. You made a mention about you are the oldest and most of your people in the organization are young. And India, they say, has the largest population of young and the youth. What would be your advice to these young Indians who are out there, about to finish the school, about to finish college, or who are in the college? What should they be thinking? Do you have anything? What would be your advice if you would have one?
The young people are enthusiastic. They are impatient. They want to work hard. So they're great qualities. And I think that it comes with being young. I think, in my mind, I think they need to be a little patient sometimes. I think patience is something which is, I would say, be a little patient in whatever you want to achieve, because they are in such a hurry. They can make mistakes. So that's I won't talk about hard work. The young people these days work really hard, and they're smart guys. And so I'm looking at things which, as young people, and also the second thing I would say is, while you try and achieve something, essentially startups, for example, right? There's always a hurdle. I was a startup. I know the problems. My advice or my point to them would be, bend in the road is not the end of the road. It's just a bend. So continue to work. And I think that's something that I would say. Another piece of advice is, I would say, exploit the situations and explore. Do both. You can do both. And my own experience is, many a times opportunities, well, let me talk about startups, because I think startups this is because it's my own experience. Sometimes we start with an idea, right? But when you start, you realize you're not getting anywhere. So you sort of become pig-headed and say, I am going to do this. But that's probably not what the market wants, right? So be flexible and listen to the customers and change your idea, right? So don't be stuck up on something that, while I say that, I will also say this, everybody tells me I have a habit of, I speak from both sides of my mouth. At the same time, while I say be flexible, I also will tell you, you have to be tenacious. You have to persevere. Your perseverance levels must be high. And so you start something, you'll get into a roadblock. You can't leave it and you say, oh, Rao told me to be flexible, so I'll do something else. No, I think you really need to also be tenacious. So be careful that don't be stuck up, but at the same time, don't be so flexible that you don't get to where you want to. That's something that I would say. In terms of many a times opportunities present themselves, somebody else's headache is your opportunity. Like I was talking to you when we had the currency crisis in 1998, right? Suddenly the problem was that the Western companies could not compete with the Koreans and the Taiwanese. And it became an opportunity for us because we moved manufacturing to India. So that was something that I had no role to play. That was a global currency issue. But then we saw an opportunity. So many times opportunities present themselves, which you have, it comes as from somewhere else, but keep your eyes and ears open, and that's very important. And sometimes your own challenge, for example, when .com bust happened, Sesh, we were 100% telecom company, 100%. And my revenues came down by 70%. And I didn't know what to do. And because of that challenge, ISRO is in Bangalore. So we went to ISRO and then we said, sir, can we do something for you? And then they said, yeah, come on over, we'll try and help you. And the rest is history. So the point I'm trying to make is, while it was a huge challenge that we had, we also looked for something else, and that became an opportunity, including my exports. The story I told you, there was nothing in India, so I went out, and today we are a global company. So opportunities sometimes present themselves for you haven't not done anything, it just comes there, but keep your eyes and ears open. And sometimes your own challenge actually is presenting an opportunity. Again, keep your eyes ears open. So that would be my advice to youngsters.
Appa, I tell you, I wish we had a couple of hours, because I think we can go on. This is, you are such a, you're making this whole thing so interesting and compelling that, I wish I had the luxury of time to carry this forward, but I am going to come back and again touch base with you to do a round two, at appropriate time, so that we talk more. Viewers are going to love this. Thank you very much for your time once again. I love this session and look forward to staying connected and catching up with you soon.
Thank you so much, Sesh, and you're doing a fantastic job. I think, this is one thing that I keep saying. This is, you're spending your time, and I think it's a huge benefit that you give on to people around with examples of people who've done what, I'm not saying I did anything great, but I think it's something that I appreciate what you do, and thank you. It's an honor being here, and good luck and all the very best to you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.